Consciousness is the ability to experience. It's what makes being subjects, not just objects of experience. Sentience is the ability of a conscious being of having positive and negative feelings. Consciousness is more basic than sentience, which involves feelings, and they are understood, as I've read somewhere, as experience with a hedonic tone. So you can be conscious without being sentient, but you cannot be sentient without being conscious. A conscious, non sentient being cannot experience positive nor negative feelings, but only neutral ones. Actually, the notion of consciousness separated from sentience is more hypothetical than real. From what we know of the reality of consciousness, it exists only associated with sentience and in the form of multiple separated individuals who are identifiable. In other words, they are particular beings. They are unique and unrepeatable. A conscious being is separate from the others and is inseparable in itself. I leave something in the description for those who want to read more about the difference between consciousness and sentience. So, given the very little difference between sentience and consciousness, and given its little to known usefulness in real cases, they could be forgivingly used as synonyms. There are other more pressing problems, though, about the use of these two terms. Only recently people are starting to use the term sentience. When used, it is quite well comprehended, but it is not commonly used, therefore not clear enough or familiar to many people. On the other hand, consciousness is very well known and frequently used, but often misused, therefore still not clear enough, or it's even misleading sometimes. The term consciousness is often confused with the term conscience, which refers to one's morality or ability to distinguish between right and wrong. In other languages, in my native language for instance, it's even worse because we have one single word to indicate both of them. In some cases, consciousness is understood as a synonym of awareness, which is actually misleading since awareness is relative to particular aspects of a sentient being's existence. For example, there's the awareness related to one's body, one's abilities, disposition, one's subconscious dynamics, awareness of time, uh, consequences of one's actions, risks, opportunities, past events, future scenario likelihood, or self awareness. And it's especially this interpretation, consciousness understood as self awareness, that I think is somehow very dangerous. A supposed lack of self awareness is often used as a false justification for abusing and discriminating against certain categories of sentient beings. Self awareness itself is a vague and confusing concept. But what is self awareness? It's an abstraction of oneself's existence. In psychology, it's known as theory of mind. It's nothing more than one's awareness of existing as as a autonomous entity detached from the outside world, a conceptualization of the self. Sometimes it's described as the ability to see oneself as an entity existing over time. It refers to something indefinite, variable, and very subjective. It can be there at different levels, times, shapes, and modalities. Some people think that those who are not understood to have this feature don't have a right to continue existing. As I said, this abstraction of one's existence is often used as an excuse to abuse and discriminate against certain categories, especially to discriminate against non human animals. And it's confused with the concept of consciousness or sentience themselves. Also, by using the words consciousness, self consciousness, and self awareness, all of them indistinctly, therefore just considered as the source of moral value. However, this is not very relevant. It is not a very relevant characteristic from an ethical perspective. It matters little to nothing how individuals are interpreting themselves or the separation between themselves and the outside world. What matters is the possibility of having experience, of having interest, and having negative feelings like physical pain and mental suffering. Antinatalism doesn't try to avoid the formation of self awareness. The direct harm arguments for antinatalism does not consider the formation of self awareness as a harm, they consider the formation of sentience as a harm. For antinatalism, it's the creation of sentience that is immoral and not the creation of self awareness. So, if we cannot consider self awareness as relevant for the beginning of existence, it might appear relevant when talking about one's interest in continue living. Without a concept of self, sentient beings are arguably incapable of imagining themselves in the future. Therefore, they would be incapable of having goals or wishes that they could be invested into. Someone says that would make them not interested or at least less interested in continue living. Well, I think that is not true. You cannot be sure of how aware and how invested in their desires sentient beings are, since self awareness, is so confused and variable. But even assuming that as true, it doesn't imply that a sentient being has no interest in continue existing. The interest or desire to continue existing is intrinsic in the existence of a conscious being. The interest in continue existing is part of conscious life itself. It cannot be separated from it. It is there even when unbearable suffering comes in and someone prefers to die. Existing implies an unavoidable, intimate, and I'd say irrational desire to continue existing. Even if you don't know that you can die, you are conditioned into wanting your experience to continue. Killing is a serious imposition. It is always morally problematic and rarely justified. In any case, it is morally problematic to impose something as drastic, significant, and permanent as death. Basically, any imposition without consent entails a moral problem. The more important what's being imposed is, the more serious it is to impose it. These kind of impositions require a justification supported by very solid and important reasons. The effects of an imposition do not necessarily have to be a negative feeling in order to be morally problematic and to require justification. Imposing a neutral or even positive change is also somehow problematic, and it requires a justification. Death deprives sentient beings not only of the negative feelings but also of the positive ones. Contrarily to never existing, death deprives particular individuals of the good things in life and of their existence itself. Imposing death is a gross violation of an individual's consent, even when it doesn't bring negative feelings to the victim. Autonomy and consent are important regardless of the judgment we ascribe to others. They are important in and of themselves. We may think we have more awareness and competence, and that may be true or false, but it doesn't automatically give us the right to make decisions about the life of others. We may think we know better what's in their best interest, but we may be wrong. There is always a certain amount of uncertainty that must be taken into consideration, and there is always everyone's right to choose for themselves, even at the cost of being wrong, as the consequences will fall on themselves only. Arrogating responsibility for someone else is always problematic and it has important downsides. It cannot be done carelessly. I'm not saying that imposing onto others is never justified, whether it's for their own good or for someone else's good. Even drastic and permanent things like that can be imposed. What I'm saying is that a sound justification is necessary. Sometimes it is justified to impose even drastic and important things, but no major imposition should be made recklessly. And before deciding to impose anything of that kind, one must consider and prefer every possible alternative.